Damien, welcome to the show.
Hi, Podge. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for jumping on. I've seen you all over the place, whether it's around Killarney or seen you on national TV, radio, you name it, you're on it. So whatever you're doing marketing wise, keep it going.
Yeah, well, no, it's been an interesting few years, I suppose. With the business and developing it, and obviously, I suppose out during COVID and kind of post-COVID, there's huge interest in the workplace. There's been an awful lot of employment law changes and updates. Businesses and workplaces have obviously rapidly evolved over the last few years. Um, so I suppose insights and opinions and all of that are always kind of wanted. Um, so I'm always happy to give them, and I suppose from a business point of view, it's good, or it's always very positive if people want to know your insights, and I suppose we'll chat a bit about that here in the podcast as well today as well, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and yeah, you're doing obviously wonderful work in this space, and it's just such a changing landscape. And I know people listening might be like, "Oh, Pat, don't bring up COVID is years ago. Come on!" But I think it is incredibly important to be able to look back at it and just see how it actually has helped or helped how it actually has shaped the workplace. And I'd be curious from your point of view, like, what do you think is one of the most profound changes to the workplace since COVID?
Well, look, I suppose the obvious one is, it was almost like an industrial revolution. I suppose the way in which it changed how we worked. I suppose, and like we're talking at the time of like the 5 year anniversary of COVID, and it's kind of, thankfully a distant memory now, but uh, it obviously, really has shaped us as people. It shaped or reshaped the workplace. So I think it's very interesting, that we summarize it and that we debate it and that we learn about it. And, the big thing with the workplace is the obvious one. It was the switch to remote and hybrid working. And I suppose in turn, that allowed for more flexible working patterns. It was a huge opportunity for work-life balance. And I suppose it's kind of ironic that such a horrible negative thing like a global health pandemic was actually the thing that, kicked that so far down the tracks. And you got this huge change, huge evolvement almost overnight. If you go back, just over 5 years ago, let's say in this country, Leo Varadkar stood on the steps and made the announcement about restrictions, where basically we were just, put back into our houses under severe restrictions. We didn't know how long that was going to last, and almost overnight, an awful lot of workplaces and offices around the country were, trying to get laptops to give to their employees to send home. Their very first experience of working from home, and like that was incredible. Vast majority of people had never experienced it before. About 8% of the workforce in Ireland had worked remotely or had an experience of working remotely. Now 90% of the whole workforce in this country have experienced remote working. So it was an extraordinary shift. And I think that's the big thing. And I suppose like 5 years later, everyone is still trying to figure out remote, hybrid, in office. There's still kind of a debate and an argument about it, or uh, perhaps a kind of a jockeying for position and so on. I suppose workers are trying to hold on to what they have because, if you go back to, let's say, our father's generation, our parents' generation, when they were at work, if someone said like, in the future you'll be able to work from home, they wouldn't have believed you. And now,
Yeah.
an awful lot of parents would have seen their young sons and daughters working from home and told them, "You've won the lotto." I mean, this is incredible. All our lives we worked hard, we strived for work-life balance, and kind of had that conflict between work life and family life and our spare time and so on. Look at you working from home, you've won the lotto. And of course, that was also an overreaction as well. So the behaviors of people, I think, throughout COVID and post-COVID is very, very interesting. Um, in that, I suppose that winning the lotto, getting that flexible working, the opportunity for hybrid and remote work, that better work-life balance is almost something that I think people secretly still don't believe it happened. I think there's a real kind of an attempt to kind of hold on to that. And then maybe on the other side of the argument, you have workplaces trying to figure out what's the best way to do things here. How do we do it fairly? What works best for us? Do we take the power back? And that whole argument is going on at the moment as well. So I think what I find is there's an awful lot of people who just aren't being honest, which I think is a pity. And I suppose we do also have to give ourselves time. This has been a very quick evolvement that was forced upon us. So I suppose we do have to kind of admit to ourselves that we have done quite well overall. I mean, it got us through a global health pandemic, which was the most important thing. That was the number one issue. But it takes time to kind of correct this, get it right. There was an awful lot of trial and error, an awful lot of workplaces and people thrown in at the deep end. So I suppose I think over the past few years there's been an awful lot of kind of maybe in some quarters bluffing or maybe sometimes pretending that there is experts in remote working and we know how to do it and all that type of thing. If you go back to 2019, very very few people were
Yeah.
experts in remote work. So people didn't become experts on remote work overnight as well. So I think it's been a bit of trial and error. And I think maybe like that period still isn't even finished. We're still evolving. Workplaces are still trying to get it right. And I think we still actually have an awful lot to learn.
Yeah, I think going back to your point around the parents' opinion about you won the lotto, I was actually thinking about this. I think during COVID, I was in my home house. I was in the room where I would have played Sega Mega Drive when I was 6, 7. And next thing
Yeah.
I'm in there, I literally was like I'm in the exact same spot. I'm literally doing almost the same thing. I'm looking at a screen, but now I'm working versus playing. So. It's just interesting to think about like when you were younger, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to be here when I'm in my 20s or 30s and
Yeah.
working from this area.
Yeah. And like I think even like even not from the work point of view, I would have met, even just younger people, younger than me, in their 20s, mid 20s. And I suppose in those years, kind of during COVID or coming out of it, they were being told that, they're lucky. Um, you get to work from home. We never got to do that and so on. And then to go to your point, where are they working from? Is it from a bedroom, the bedroom that they grew up with in the same house? They've had all their life experiences and now they're putting their whole world into that building, especially during COVID as well, where you had, kind of the social restrictions and so on, or else you had young people working, from box rooms and shared accommodation. And like we know for a fact, and it would have been said more so pre-COVID, that the environment in which you work is very, very important. Disconnecting from work is very, very important. And not getting the environment right or the disconnection from your work right can be hugely damaging, to mental health and your welfare and so on. So I always kind of had a bit of a laugh to myself about, this winning the lotto and how lucky people were that they were able to work from home. When you thought about the environments and I suppose the huge impact that you can have from, putting pretty much your work and your whole life, especially during those COVID years, basically into the four walls of the house. And I suppose like an awful lot of research kind of towards the end of the COVID years and post COVID. And I suppose, the guys over in the US always do great research. But there is research there to show that there was huge damaging impacts with regards to things like, workplace loneliness became a big thing. There was that gap between people, that social isolation and so on. I think you also see it then as well, perhaps where, especially with the younger cohort, again, the people that were just coming out of college or in their first few years of work, that, there was impacts with regards to, the social uh, connectivity, I suppose, how people behave socially, um, perhaps being almost fearful of kind of face-to-face interaction or conversations even, an awful lot of kind of our communications were solely being done through technology, through email, through work communication platforms and so on, which has its own impacts in its own ways as well, because obviously it's a lot easier to write a message or send an email than it is to talk with a person, use your body language, react to their body language. But when you're not sharp in those areas, it can have very negative impacts on the individual, but it can obviously have very negative impacts on workplaces and business as well.
I can't remember where. I'll try get my source for where I heard this, but there was a discussion just around that kind of the newer generation of people working coming in, and they're doing a lot of remote work. So now it comes the time, let's just say for whatever reason they have to go into the office for just a general work event, but if they're fully remote, and then they go in and they experience high levels of anxiousness, and then they equate, they say, oh, the in-place workplace is not good, it makes me too anxious, I need to work remote. But actually, what could be happening is you don't have exposure to being at an in office or a workplace often. That when you go out of your norm, out of your comfort zone, like you said, with the screen or sending emails or writing Slacks, that can be quite a difficult experience. So now the point that they were making was that the younger generation might say in office is bad, like remote is good, but it's just a pure experience thing. They've never experienced in office for a longer period of time, and they would get over that anxiousness and become more comfortable.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, it's not their fault. It was the hand that they were dealt. And I suppose like maybe older generations maybe don't understand that so much because that's not our experience. Older generations got that exposure, obviously, where you had to go into the office, where you had to meet people. That was life. Things weren't, done over Zoom or having online meetings. Weren't a thing. So they weren't our experiences. So maybe that gets forgotten as well. And I suppose, I think we do need to be careful inside workplaces that that younger generation or that Gen Z generation, that they're not kind of the forgotten generation in that regard, with regards to, their experiences through COVID when they were, finishing school, finishing college, spending their first few years inside in the workplace, that kind of era, obviously, like that had huge impacts with regards to their experiences, with their social interactions, I suppose their social interaction capabilities and all that type of thing. I think workplaces, I suppose you hear people complaining about, Gen Z all of the time, as if like they're, this bad crop of
Yeah.
young people that, just aren't the same as us. But like that always happens. Younger people are always different. They've grown up at a different time. Like I suppose if you look at Gen Z in the workplace, how technologically savvy they are, the most educated generation that have ever been produced. They bring so much, but they have had different experiences. And the obvious one in those kind of formative years, finishing off their education, starting off in the workplace, is obviously COVID. I mean, it probably had, I'm talking from a workplace point of view, probably had the biggest impact on that generation in comparison to any other generation.
Yeah, and it's probably taking us, we're still probably discovering the actual impacts even at this point.
I think so, yeah, yeah. And that's why I say like it is important, I think, to not like it's very easy to kind of stop talking about COVID. It's in the past. Let's not mention it again. It's over. Thanks be to God. And like from the health point of view and our ordinary everyday lives, obviously it's great that it's in the past. But like we shouldn't ignore like the impacts that it has had, psychologically, and how it formed us. And how it brings us forward into the future. And I think it's fascinating from the workplace point of view. Um, there's absolutely no doubt about that because it changed the whole landscape of the workplace and how we perform work every day. So it was revolutionary in that from that point of view.
Given the moment in time we're at now, how can companies balance flexibility with fairness between kind of remote and in-office staff?
Yeah, well, I suppose in my experience, the one thing I don't like at the moment is that kind of jockeying for position or jockeying for power. Okay, and that's a kind of a natural thing. Like if you read the newspapers every day, if you're looking up the news or articles online, and this kind of topic is coming up, or it's something that you're interested in, you'll see like people pushing remote work. Um, and talking about, I suppose, bringing people into workplaces, being kind of, caveman stuff and all that type of thing. You'd see big name CEOs of, um, big multinational companies kind of pushing, talking negatively about remote work and pushing getting back into the office and all that type of thing. But like they're all agendas. That's people looking after their own agenda. One agenda is to push remote work. The other agenda is to kind of dampen it, speak about it negatively, and bring people back into the workplace. Like what I hope happens is that we mature, I suppose, and get more comfortable with talking about this honestly. And I suppose for some people, remote working will work. For others, it won't. For some, hybrid works well. For all of those people, it may change throughout their lifetime. So for example, an awful lot of young people would be best served by, not at least not fully working remote and having those kind of social experiences and interactions inside an office or a workplace. Equally so, people may have extra responsibilities at certain times in their lives, caring needs. Obviously, anyone with a young family always has those kind of extra caring needs. So again, the flexibility with regards to their work patterns, the availability of remote work and hybrid work is very, very helpful. Like I thought actually some kind of the older generation in the workplace was very interesting during COVID because some of that kind of older generation, maybe workers in their 50s, early 60s, they were doing remote work for the very first time. I think in particular, actually, some women in the workplace found it very, very difficult because the last place they wanted to be doing their work was at home. They had been doing it all their life. Perhaps they had spent time out of the workforce, when they started a young family. Then they went back into the workplace. And if you look at those people, they would have been maybe in the workplace back in the 70s and 80s when there was a very different attitude to women in the workplace. So staying at home to work was something that never satisfied them. They loved going out to work. They loved socializing in the workplace. It brought them a huge sense of satisfaction. So people from different generations have different attitudes and behaviors towards remote work. And what I do think about, the makeup of work, whether it's remote hybrid, or in work in office, is that it's different from individual to individual, and it can look different from individual to individual. The problem with that is if you can try and achieve it, great, but it's complex. Of course it is. So if and every workplace is different, and I do believe that number one is that a business operates, and people do have to that workers can believe that they just have a right to remote working, that they have a right to flexibility to suit their own needs ahead of business needs is a nonsense. I'd be absolutely blunt about that. But at the same time, obviously, the makeup of work, allowing that flexibility, allowing for it to be fair, is complex. I suppose that's the huge dilemma for workplaces now. But I think it's also a mistake to kind of have a blanket thing that, we allow for remote working. So, we've done our job here. We're flexible. We're a good, positive employer. And you think that you're going to get a huge amount of kudos for that. The unfortunate thing is that you're probably not. Because it's different from person to person. Some people want to be in the office. A lot of workplaces maybe may allow flexible working patterns. Some people attend the office more than others. Then you start to get proximity bias. So the people that are, who it suits to work from home because they need that flexibility, and it suits them. But yet they may have a problem with the person who can and wants to go into the office more regularly. So they're attending the office 1 or 2 days more than you. The person working remotely feels, their ideas are being put forward. They'll get the promotion. They're up to something. They're speaking about me negatively when I'm not there. Do I need to get back in? And all of a sudden you're just back to square one and you've these employment relations difficulties happening again. And I suppose we see unfortunately, employment relations issues crossing our desk, obviously, in the HR consultancy work that we do at HR Buddy, but, they have to be dealt with correctly, obviously. But you always kind of look at the root causes of these things. And excuse me, I suppose the culture inside an organizations, and I suppose very often the kind of real root causes are silent or remain hidden, and how much the makeup of work and the organization of work between who's remote, who's hybrid, who's attending the office, how many days a week, and all that kind of mixed up. I think it's a huge root cause of relationship difficulties inside in the workplace at the moment.
If you work with a company, if you look at their remote work policies, do you challenge them and be like, why are these in place, and kind of get into that nitty gritty? Are you just doing it as
Yeah, well,
a virtue signaling thing, or what, is there any basis behind it? Do you dive
well,
into
I
that?
think like my advice, I suppose, right from the start of COVID, I suppose, because you know, like pretty much the entire majority of workplaces were kind of doing remote working policies for the very first time, and then you had the legislation coming in over the last few years as well, and all that type of thing. So it was all very reactionary. But my advice was always that I suppose that the employer needed to keep flexibility as well, and I think that's important. Like that, that was always my advice to workplaces was to keep flexibility. So I think the big mistakes that we make as people, and I think employers kind of fall into the trap of this, is workers want flexibility, but then they want to know, like in writing, what does that flexibility look like? You get it all the time, especially like uh, I suppose if you're hiring or if you're recruiting, and you may advertise it as a hybrid role.
Mhm.
The first question the candidate would ask you is how
So
does the hybrid role work?
how many days?
Yeah, how many days, what time on the days, and like it always fascinates me that we now have a world of flexible working, and you have employers giving flexible work to their employees. They're advertising it. And yet, when they advertise it, as people, we go straight away. Tell me exactly how that flexibility works. So, like, what is flexibility? Are we ever happy? We want flexibility, but then we want to know exactly when, where, how, why, what day, what hour of the week. So, like, I always find that incredible. I suppose the thing with the introduction of the right to request flexible working, the right to request remote working, and the whole shift during the COVID period to remote and flexible working, uh, is that there was almost kind of, I suppose, a right expected to have this provided to you. But flexible working does work both ways, and flexible working does have to do what it says on the tin. I think the problem is that as people, we actually have a problem with flexibility. We want it, obviously, for our own good, but we actually have we have an issue with flexibility because as humans, we want to know when, where, why, how. I suppose that's almost kind of a constant kind of battle that's going on in the workplace at the moment, I think.
Yeah, we want a sense of structure and routine, especially when it comes to work. It's probably just something we're so accustomed to, right? We don't see work as this thing that we can kind of mix and match and be flexible with. It's probably just maybe it's just something that's been learned from past
Yeah,
experience.
well, yeah, well, look, I suppose as people and as human beings, we want security as well. You know what I mean? It's our natural makeup that uh, when you got off the bus, when you came home from school, you knew which house you were going to. You knew you had your home, your security, your safety. Um, so I suppose an awful lot of people aren't kind of very comfortable in a flexible kind of arrangement. It's not naturally part of who we are or what makes us feel, I suppose, happy or secure or safe. So we strive for it in work to have flexibility for that work-life balance, which is obviously very, very important. And we're always striving to try and achieve it. It's a difficult thing to achieve, like kind of perfect work-life balance. Very few of us will ever achieve perfect work-life balance. It's probably actually impossible. We can achieve a better work-life balance. There's no doubt about that. But the kind of, have you ever met an individual who said, I figured it out. I have perfect work-life balance. It kind of doesn't happen. It's something we're always kind of striving for. We can better it, but kind of achieve perfect work-life balances. So it's almost going to be a constant kind of battle we have ourselves throughout our careers in the workplace.
Yeah, I think the evolution is interesting, right? When COVID happened, companies essentially got thrown into it. Like I said, get the laptops out to everybody. Then I presume there is a little bit of a progression. You hear things like, oh, these people, this group of people, like software engineer, oh, they can work from home, like they can do everything from there. But this group of people will need to be in the office. So we're actually splitting them by roles. But what you're saying too is there's a personality aspect to this too. Like I mightn't really be wired to work from home. It might drive me insane. I might need to be in the office to be successful, where someone else could do it pretty comfortably. Is there any like personality tests or that companies might do just to kind of gauge that?
Well, to be honest with you, like I suppose the tools within that regard are actually, I don't think we've caught up, Podge, to be honest with you. Like I'm sure there is some tests that can be done that, and again, they're personality tests that most definitely will tell you whether you're suited. I suppose to being isolated and to working from home, whether you're extroverted and introverted. But I suppose they're probably the same tools that existed pre-COVID, as opposed to now. What's happened, I think, is the workplace change first before an awful lot of things have kind of caught up. But I think it's important that organizations know their people. And it is interesting, I suppose the very small amount of workplaces, in my experience, that would carry out those kind of, personality testing with their new recruits and the newer hires, or indeed maybe just their existing staff. Um, because it is important. I think for individuals themselves to realize what is the best makeup of work for themselves. And I think like we have to do more as well inside the education system in that regard, to ensure that like let's say people in transition year and fifth year inside in our secondary school system are finding out, you know, um, from a work point of view, what's going to work best for them in the future. Um, you know, are they suited to remote working? I suppose isolation working on their own, not having face-to-face interaction, or is that something that they're not suited, that they're not suited to? I think that's very, very important. And I suppose what's happened over the last few years is none of this really mattered. We're all, we've all just kind of gone along with it. And obviously, there is a negative side to that where some people aren't having the right experiences because the makeup of their work isn't correct for their personality.
Yeah, I'd love that to be incorporated along with kind of what's the pathway or what are you interested in doing. I think having that extra layer of like you have your interest, but how do you apply yourself and talking about like is it in office and there's a whole different like it's not just in office and remote, right? It's just a whole
Yeah,
way of how do you work best.
and like there's, I suppose, there are entire industries that are never going to have remote work as well. Obviously, I mean, if you look at defense forces, emergency services, healthcare, retail, hospitality, construction, the trades, all these types of industries obviously, in the main are not your remote kind of hybrid work patterns are never going to exist inside there. So again, that's a certain type of personality, a certain type of person who is suited to that. And I suppose there are challenges, obviously, for those industries and for those careers as well in recruiting. Because again, I think you can get the generation above you kind of saying, oh, you can work from home, you can work from anywhere. It's a huge advantage, obviously, for an awful lot of people. An awful lot of younger people are going to be attracted to that because it opens up the world to you. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in a place of work to perform your work every day. Obviously, there's a huge advantage to it. But again, I think it's important that our young people know going into the future, that they may be suited to one thing and not another.
Yeah, I agree. One, I'd love to get your opinion. One cohort I maybe feel a bit of sympathy for our leaders. And the reason I say it is because I think people might have underestimated when it went from if you were particularly in office and then went bang to remote within the space of a week. I don't know is everything fully translatable as a leader. I think you have to actually adapt your leadership style to be able to cater for a remote workforce. And I don't know, has there been trainings? Are you seeing that in terms of leadership development, or companies coming to you and saying we want to be able to organize a Zoom meeting effectively, or be able to work with someone who's remote versus in office? How do we keep equity there and fairness? Have you
Yeah.
encountered any of that?
Yeah, I think the huge area has been, the line manager. Um, when you're talking about leadership, it's the people that are managing people every day. And I suppose, like, I would in particular really kind of sympathize or have empathy for them over the last few years. Because again, like, they would be a lot of the people that we'd be dealing with in HR body as well. I suppose, like, line managers are worried about, doing the wrong thing. And there's the compliance aspect as a line manager and dealing with people as well. But then obviously you have to shift to, dealing with people remotely, um, having the tools, having the, right communication techniques. Instead of verbal communication, it became written communication. You've all those kind of issues. So, if you send an email to someone kind of writing out the way you would speak, it may come across very, very differently on an email. So, everyone's kind of communicating now remotely and online. So that can play out very, very differently to, when you were used to dealing with people face to face or in an office or talking to them over the phone and so on. And line managers had to deal with all that change. And I think an awful lot of workplaces and line managers in their experience would have kind of been doing that, kind of on a whim. Maybe for, the first 12 months before, people, an awful lot of workplaces realize, we need to get our tools right, we need to get our technology right, and we need to train you as a line manager. And I think the line manager training is something that we've done an awful lot of work um, here with our clients that we're working with over the past few years. And it's managing people remotely, I suppose, is the big thing. It's communication, written communication, managing people remotely successfully, I suppose, and that you can still keep their trust. It doesn't become helicopter management. I suppose there was an awful lot of insecurities as well. When people are kind of or were experiencing remote work for the first time, if they received an email from their boss, they thought, he or she is checking in on me because they don't trust me now that I'm working from home. You'd all those kind of games being played. But I think like the greatest investment in this regard that workplaces can make is investing in their line managers, investing in their leaders, because if they can get that right, in general, you keep, an awful lot of the other people that you have in your organization happy if you can get that part of it right.
How can leaders then foster trust in a practical way?
Well, I think it's to be fair across the board, I suppose. I suppose where you would see people making mistakes, I think, is again with regards to communication. So it's where you don't have open communication. The big difference between a workplace that, where we were all, in office or whatever it was, is people knew the goings on every day. And then we became isolated as people working remotely. Teams started working remotely. And then the communications became isolated and there was gaps. And then the communications, are individual. So if you're under my leadership and I'm contacting you and you don't know who else I'm contacting about this, a problem starts to emerge between yourself and myself. Okay, so I suppose those tools and technologies to have team platforms and open communication is very, very important. And I think most of the kind of mistakes that line managers would have made when they weren't experienced with managing remote working teams was they were going individually to people and everything became kind of an individual problem. An awful lot of the team working remotely remained kind of blindsided as to how they were managing the other people, and then all those kind of employment relations problems start to emerge. So I think open communication from a line manager is very, very important, and we have to remember that a line manager or leader does have to, I wouldn't say work extra hard, but they most definitely have to work smartly. Originally, I was probably working harder, but you would hope that, as we're evolving, it's working smarter, but working smarter with how they communicate with everybody, and that is seen, that it's transparent, that it's fair, that it's consistent. And I think, if a line manager or leader is doing their job well, as they always have done, if they can have open, transparent communication with their people and with their teams, they don't run into the same problems as if they don't do that.
Yeah, and I get, like I said, it mightn't be anything that the line manager was intentionally doing. It's just the shift in terms of communication. And then on top of that, I guess in some companies there was this monitoring stage where t systems were probably being implemented to be able to track time. Or I know I've heard some people's work, they like track your clicks on
Yeah,
the, which I'm like, that is mind blowing. That to me would lead to, I'd feel like this company doesn't trust me. But
well, like that. There was a bit of there was a phase of this, probably while COVID was still going on. In the kind of latter days of COVID, as workplaces had all reopened, the restrictions were very, very limited, and the vaccines were there and we're coming out of it, and um, but there was no doubt that remote working was going to, was here to stay and so on. Um, and there was that kind of period where I think um, employers never really trusted remote working and were never going to trust it, maybe. Um, or most certainly hadn't got to that point yet anyway, and felt that, we need to get the technology to monitor people. I think that, in my experience, I think that died away. And thankfully, because I don't think that's kind of the correct route to go, because it cuts out all trust straight away. I suppose it tells people who are working remotely that you're against remote working, you're not trusted, and so on. Now, obviously, organizations do have to be compliant. They have to protect against, GDPR. They need security in place. Or, there is that side of it. But again, you have to communicate that correctly so that your employees understand it. And I think some technologies and softwares with regard to security may have been implemented by workplaces who were doing remote working for the first time. And really, it was a legal thing. It was to be compliant. It was for security and protection. But when it wasn't communicated in the right way, obviously employees. So, like, a huge part of it again is communicating things and leaving people know why something is happening and explaining it to them. But regards kind of monitoring people who are working from home because you don't trust them, I always thought that was kind of a bad idea. And I suppose what you would have seen is where employers or workplaces made that call, they did actually lose people, didn't retain staff, and they would have seen that maybe as being over the top, a kind of a mistake, really. They lost people, and obviously, you know, the employment market and how stretched it has been kind of cut out some of that kind of, iron fist kind of management nonsense where, we're going to monitor everyone, everyone and everything, every minute, every hour of the day, needs to be, tracked and accounted for, all that type of thing. It was never going to work because, innovation, creativity, all those kind of things, engagement levels drop. You might be looking after productivity, but obviously end up with unhappy people. So I think thankfully that was something that kind of fell by the wayside quite quickly, I think.
yeah, and I have an interesting experience. Like I've been remote working since 2017, and when I first started my job as well, I had a wonderful manager, Pete, his name was, and we were kind of just going over the job expectations, and I was asking questions, like um how many people do you expect me to contact in a day? How many messages should I send? Like what type of messages? And he kind of took a step back. Now, disclaimer, very early on in the process in terms of the
Yeah,
company, and he just said, I trust you. He's like, you
yeah,
have the people you have to work with. How you decide to do that, like I fully trust you. And at the time, I was like, there's two thoughts, right? You could say, I could take complete advantage here. I could not work. They wouldn't have a Scooby-Doo. great for me, free money, yay. But then the other side is, okay, this person trusts me. I have X amount of people I need to look after and help them build their health goals. I don't want to leave him down, or I'm going to do a good job. I care about this. And I went the latter, right? As in, it actually made me more motivated. Interesting to what you said, more engaged. And it's part of a reason why I actually fell in love with the job in the first place was I had that sense of autonomy and flexibility that I could do the work as I would see fit. I just thought it was interesting. Now, very much extreme on the other end to what we're talking about, but sometimes when you do give people that trust, they'll give it back to you in terms of engagement and
Yeah,
enjoyment.
well, I suppose like, and that's what the idea is, someone who's not trusted, isn't happy, isn't secure, will have insecurities, uh, won't perform to the same level, won't stay engaged, higher chance of absenteeism, higher chance of that they leave the company. Um, so yeah, there was a kind of an insecure period where I think a lot of employers, a lot of workplaces thought, we need to track everything. But as I said, I think it fell by the wayside very, very quickly, which is a good thing because it was something that I would have never touted anyway, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think it's a good kind of if we continue on in terms of the next evolution. I think some people are super excited, some people are absolutely terrified when it comes to the integration of AI into the workplace. And do you think that AI will give people more autonomy in their work, or do you think it'll actually restrict their freedom?
Well, like, AI is interesting. I suppose, like, what we found with AI inside workplaces is that it's rapidly evolving. Its progress is, it's incredible, really. It's transformational. It's happened very, very quickly. I think for that reason, what we have found, there's an awful lot of fear with regards to AI inside workplaces. There's a fear of kind of lack of control, a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding, lack of training, lack of policies. And I suppose never mind kind of a lack of policies in writing. And I suppose that's what we would be working with people a lot on is, having AI policies in place so that everyone understands, what are the guidelines, what are the rules, what are we using, what can we use it for, the when, where, why, how, all that to make everybody's life easy, which is very, very important from a compliance point of view, obviously, because, if someone does something wrong with AI technology inside in a business, it can have very drastic consequences. Um, like, I suppose the big fear, or what was kind of coming, maybe again this has died away a little bit, was that is AI going to take our jobs and all this kind of thing. There was that kind of fear, but I would have always said that was a pile of nonsense because everything was meant to take our jobs and none of us were meant to be working by the year whatever 2010. 2020, 2030. And yes, like technology, smart technology, the internet, robotics, machinery, like you can go back and back and back. There's always evolvements, there's always progress. And all these things were meant to kind of take our jobs. And yet here we are in 2025. AI is being used in workplaces. That's meant to take all our jobs as well. And most workplaces don't have enough workers, can't get enough workers. We're at full employment in this country. More people work in Ireland than ever worked here before, 2.8 million. So I never had that fear. I think that's a load of nonsense. What will happen with AI is it will make us smarter. It will make us work smarter. Um, it will make businesses and workplaces and people quicker, more efficient, and that's all the positive sides of it. Um, but there probably is a period of adjustment where we don't know what we're doing with AI, and an awful lot of workplaces, an awful lot of people don't know what they're doing with AI. Maybe, to be fair, can't be trusted with AI. So that's why workplaces do need to be very, very careful. The the big issues that kind of, again, I suppose, cross our desk is where AI is used as kind of a shortcut. So it's where there isn't controls in place inside in a workplace. An employee uses AI to perform some part of their work or a work task, and it goes wrong. And it goes wrong because AI hasn't bought them to where they should have arrived at as an end result. And there's consequences because of that. Um, the other things that come across our desk is where I suppose, leaders, line managers, or employers don't have the knowledge or the education or the training themselves in AI and feel maybe that their employees are ahead of them. So there's an insecurity about that. So they maybe leave their employees go off and kind of, a bit of trialing or we need to evolve with this. We can't
Hmm.
refuse the AI kind of evolution. But again, there's a danger in that because they have no control, and AI can do wrong as well, just as well as it can do good or do positive things. So they're kind of the experience that we're seeing with AI at the moment. I think AI for the future will be in a very good place, but we're in a real kind of period now of I suppose trying to get workplaces to realise that maybe they need training. They need to train the line managers. We've just been talking about how line managers were able to manage remote workers. So like how are your line managers going to manage their teams using AI? Because it is happening and it is going to happen on into the future. An awful lot of workplaces are using AI unbeknownst to them. They're not, it's just naturally happening. These technologies, these advancements are coming into their software, into their everyday working. And again, where you can have, remote working, hybrid working, and so on, there's a larger chance that these things can happen, I suppose. Without you knowing, if you're not keeping control, if you're not communicating on it, if your line managers aren't comfortable in it. So again, training, education, communication, getting policies in place, not just in writing, but actually sitting down and taking time to know what way AI should be working in your workplaces now and on into the future is very, very important. But I do think that in general, people are behind AI. Obviously, it's going ahead of us, and we're almost trying to catch up to it. And for that reason, we're kind of maybe running scared a little bit with regards to AI as well, which is a pity because obviously there's so much positive advancements and results that can be got from embracing AI as well.
Yeah, in your opinion, how can workers actually future-proof themselves almost in a world that is just becoming increasingly shaped by AI?
Yeah, well, I suppose like from the workers' point of view, there's no doubt they're going to um, rely on their workplaces to provide training and educate them and so on. And they are going to be guided by their workplaces. Um, like I think one of the fastest growing industries in recruitment is AI engineering. So, I've no doubt that our younger people, we will see them going into AI education, AI engineering, and so on into the future. But like to be honest, to answer your question, I think like there's investment needed from at government level from the state to ensure that workplaces and perhaps the older generations that have are gone past education now are trained and educated on AI so that they're comfortable with it and so on. Because like from an economic point of view, from a business point of view, I think that would be a very worthwhile investment. I'm not sure from that point of view like that the government are embracing this in the way that they should be. We should be looking to have an educated society of people and workers in our economy who are comfortable and educated and sharp with regards to AI and the use of AI tools. Um, and I don't think there's enough being done in that area. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see
Yeah,
government investment in it.
what's the issue there? Is it just an ignorance to it, or is it a case of they don't understand how valuable it's going to be, or is it a case of they know it's going to be just ever prevalent that it's people are naturally going to learn it anyway?
Yeah, well, I think the workplaces will have to catch up. So I think employers and workplaces don't get enough supports in this kind of area. And it isn't just AI. You could go into, well-being, workplace well-being. Workplace well-being isn't just workplace well-being. a person's well-being is, from society, it's the whole person. It naturally goes into the workplace or comes back out of the workplace. But yet workplace well-being is only for the employer, never for the state to attach it to, as a public health matter. And I think it's the same with things like AI. If there's kind of training and learning and education that can be done in an area, I think sometimes maybe uh, the powers that be say, let the employer sort this out. Let the employer figure it out, uh, pay for the advancement of it, and so on. It's almost kind of like, I suppose businesses are always looking to evolve, stay sharp, move with technology, move into the future. So they're naturally going to do it anyway. Whereas, I mean, if you look at AI in society, not just in the workplace, I mean, obviously an awful lot of the older generations will be fearful of it, won't feel in control, and won't be trained and educated in it in the same way that our younger people coming up there. So I think it's a pity that some of those things are ignored sometimes. I think investment in AI is something that should be done at a government level. To make us sharp as a society and make our economy sharp through our workplaces as well.
Yeah, and it's not something I've ever heard being discussed, so it's probably a long way off.
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath, but I'd like to see it.
When we're talking about kind of AI, you mentioned there a lot of the costs can be incurred by the workplace. But what I've noticed now when I'm on LinkedIn or even just through my own experience is a lot of people don't work for a company anymore. They actually work as contractors and freelancers.
Yeah.
Like what's that whole movement about? I presume it's in order to be increase kind of flexibility.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's research there to show, or there's research telling us that, in a very short space of time, by the middle of the next decade, the biggest employer in the world will be ourselves. It'll be people employing ourselves,
Wow.
whatever you want to call them, whether it's contractors or freelancers and so on. No, an awful lot of that is, I suppose, again, technology advancements or the change in the way that we have worked. So everything kind of going online and so on. Obviously, it opens up the whole world to people. The world is much smaller now. Um, I suppose an awful lot of research again is showing us that um, that work from anywhere kind of thing or working online obviously gives an opportunity to, where you're not tied to an employer or to a career, and allows you to contract or freelance and so on. Advancements in AI and technology and so on, it all kind of leads towards that. So we're seeing an increase in your kind of freelance working, um, and research is telling us we're going to see that on into the future. So I think if anything, it's kind of a natural evolvement. To be honest with you, that is it's kind of running with the times, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah, it's great for the people who are doing it, I suppose, if there is constant work or if you're in the right niche too. Like you said, you have exposure to people all over the world versus it used to be just maybe where you locally live too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, even like my own experience, like pre-COVID, HR buddy and the HR consultancy that I was running, I would have been running it as a standalone HR consultant. Would have very much have been tied to kind of the southwest of the country. Then COVID happened, and we won't go through everything that happened during COVID. Maybe we didn't know what was going to happen at the start and all that. But coming out the other side of it, HR Buddy was a nationwide consultancy with clients all over the country. So obviously, online availability online and so on, your website, social media, the geographics, remote working, flexible working, all that type of thing. Like the geographics were kind of gone out of it. So it opened up like the whole market in the Republic of Ireland to my business. And really it was actually just COVID that done that. Like, so I suppose there's so many opportunities for people, and that the world became smaller. The whole world opened up because of the way that things changed in a very short amount of time. And in that, like, there's huge opportunity for people. So that's naturally just going to evolve, and we probably will see an awful lot more of, which is great because it's innovative.
Yeah.
It's good for economies. Where we live in say in Kerry, like, we need the world to be opened up. We're not in the capital in Dublin with huge population and all that kind of thing. Like, we come from kind of a tourism county, so all those, like, anyone, like, all up the Wild Atlantic Way, all those counties, rural counties, like, it's fabulous opportunity in that. And like, you would have seen that during COVID as well. You would have seen an awful lot of people, like people from Dublin and so on, would have moved down to South Kerry, into parts of Kerry, to live for the first time in their lives. They got an opportunity to live somewhere different. It didn't, they could work from anywhere. And like, there's a fabulous kind of opportunity in that, but also a better chance for people, I think, to be happy and have good work-life balance and so on. Like, I suppose for my business to evolve and kind of compete nationally and be a national HR consultancy firm, I didn't have to up sticks and move to Dublin.
Mhm.
I don't have to get a flight up every morning to Dublin to make that happen. So, like, there's a great opportunity in that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. We're still not fully there, but I think that is really nice that you can stay closer to your hometown or a different area of the country that you want to live in versus, like you said, there are certain roles where if you want to do it, you automatically know, oh, okay, I got to move to Dublin now or
Yeah,
nearby.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and like, with regards to freelancing, and kind of people working for themselves, it is something that's going to continue to kind of increase. That's what the research says. But the other interesting thing is how many people actually make a career out of their hobbies. And obviously that's something because of um, online business as well. Whatever that might be, whether people make candles and then, start a business from that and start open up an online retail store and so on. There's so many examples of that as well. But again, if you go back 10 years, that kind of wouldn't be possible. That would have remained a hobby for that person. So, like, there's fabulous opportunity in all of this as well.
It's a random tangent, but digital nomads, I don't know if do you, I presume you don't work with them, but do the government try keep tabs? Like, do they notice, oh, these people are like jumping between country to country and aren't living anywhere? I don't know.
Well, yeah, again, I think there was kind of questions over this. People kind of, this work from anywhere idea, um, that, people could hop from country to country, and then there would be kind of, workplace accountants and so on, kind of coming to us asking us questions, or we were going back to them trying to figure out, tax and how people could be compliant and all that type of thing. Um, but and like, it's interesting actually, like, that we've developed an employer of record service, which was kind of actually pretty much came from that. And I suppose, again, if you went back 5 years ago, if you asked me what's an employer of record, I wouldn't have even known. But we're running an employer of record service now, whereby, let's say, a company in any given country wants to hire someone or place someone in Ireland. They don't have an entity in Ireland, so, how do they stay compliant? And the answer is an employer of record, and HR Buddy provides those services. So, there is a legal way and a compliant way of doing this. The employer of record service is one of the very obvious, easy ways of doing it. But I think there was a period kind of during COVID, or especially post COVID, when people were kind of settling down again, where a lot of employers were kind of ringing up saying, "Look, we've a fella that moved to Spain. I'm not sure if he's staying there or not, but he's been over there for the last 8 months now. What do we do?" So again, it was an example of people experiencing that for the very first time, and maybe an awful lot of people not really knowing the right answers and so on, from a compliance and a tax point of view. But there is ways to do this. We're providing that service as an employer of record service, where people can move to different countries, work from anywhere. Employers can allow for it, and they can still be compliant and know that everything has been done legally correctly. So there's been an awful lot of learnings there as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't even know that existed. That's good to know.
yeah. But like that's part of a service of the services that we do now. Again, I mean, even go back 3, 4 years ago, I would have never imagined that we were, going to be providing employer of record service. It's almost something that we had to move with because it was happening. You know what I mean? So, um, but again, it's great. Like anyone, has the opportunity if they're in a career where they can work remotely. They're not tied down to a particular town or even a particular country. They can try out new things. Maybe even they don't have to be young people. We always say young people can try out new things.
Yeah.
Maybe like a working couple there can up sticks. Maybe move to, Barcelona or Rome or wherever. Try it out for 12 months. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. And their employers are in a situation, because they can actually make this happen, do it compliantly. Everything's above board. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
We,
it's
we did
exciting.
thank our lucky stars for kind of the opportunities and the positives that came from probably something that that obviously was a very negative thing in COVID as well.
Yeah, definitely. Damien, is there anything that we haven't got to in relation to the workplace that you feel is important for the listeners to know about?
Um, if I start to Podge, it could be another
We
hour.
could be here for another
Like,
hour.
where's the beginning and the end of that piece of string? Um, no, like the look, I could go through a lot, but the one thing I would say is that I think workplaces have done very well over the last few years because it's been a very turbulent few years, and like most people have work, most people have more flexibility and more opportunity now, and like workplaces and the economy is going well as we speak. Hopefully that will continue on into the future. We never know, but um, I think the kind of big thing in workplaces is, and like again, I go back to COVID. We were asked during COVID, like, how can we get through this in the workplace? And the idea was to, that you would have empathy and sympathize with people's situations, because like you would have had things like a workplace opening up again. Business owner thought like he or she might never open up again, didn't know when they can get their business going again. So now they can bring their employees back in. The employees didn't know if they'd ever get back to work and so on. And then like childcare facilities weren't open. So the workers had no one to mind their children, Nana and Granda weren't even available because obviously they were restricted for obvious reasons. And then you got kind of maybe some employment relations difficulties in that period. But I always think of that kind of particular time that like the advice was, give each other a break. This will pass. Like sympathize with each other, have empathy. I know everyone's stressed. Everyone doesn't know how this is working. It's an extraordinary situation, but there's kind of a long term, relationship there, and this is an extraordinary set of circumstances. I think we always have to remember that those kind of times as we move on into the future, that an awful lot of the employment relations difficulties are, I suppose, on call for the root causes of employment relations problems. Don't need to happen. And an awful lot of the time, it's people kind of battling against each other, sometimes for no reason. Whether it's some stress from their personal lives or whatever the case may be. Businesses have to work hard to make their businesses a success. We all, workers working inside in workplaces, they have families, they have caring needs, they have personal responsibilities, all that type of thing. But people aren't different either. We all have the same kind of caring needs and responsibilities and so on. So sometimes we can be unfair on each other, and I think we have to remember that as well. When we're going to work every day, that we have to be fair to everyone else as well, not just looking out for number one all the time. And sometimes maybe cast your mind back to some COVID experiences isn't a bad thing to do to kind of bring you back to the right place again.
Yeah, tapping into the empathy and just keeping it people centric.
Yeah. I think that, an awful lot of the employment relations difficulties or things that happen in workplaces, they don't need to happen and people regret them afterwards. The stuff that we deal with every day, but I think an awful lot of them are avoidable.
Yeah, yeah, fully agree. Damien, thank you so much. I think one thing's for sure anyway, what we've discussed, like workplaces have changed and like maybe that's a good thing.
Um, yeah, no, definitely for the better, I think. But an awful lot of workplaces are obviously evolving, always will. But like it's been an incredible few years in the whole, kind of remote, hybrid, work from anywhere type of working, flexible working. An awful lot of workers' rights legislation that workplaces have had to deal with as well. So it's been a turbulent few years, but um, I think workplaces have to keep on working and evolving to make all these changes have positive outcomes and not be kind of a negative kind of battle for power or something that maybe is seen as a negative thing that was forced upon them or something that they don't like. There's an awful lot of positive involvement that has happened in workplaces, which I think if it's fostered and embraced into the future, it'll only be seen as an overall success.
Yeah, a lot of what you spoke about is kind of that communication piece is key, being open and honest. And yeah, like you said, you're trying to you're putting these things in place to create a better workplace environment versus like a restricted one for people.
Yeah, no, like definitely, and again, I would say everyday communication between managers and their people or employers and their people is the one area that can always be improved.
Mhm.
Just communication doesn't have to take more time. It's just more meaningful communication. Sometimes it's just avoidance of communication, so the wrong thing isn't said or something is said and it's picked up in the wrong way. Like if we're not communicating with each other, not every piece of communication can be, positive and happy. Like we have to have constructive, meaningful conversations inside the workplace as well. And I think you see people maybe running scared of that an awful lot of time. So it's very important to kind of keep that good, meaningful communication going, or maybe improving it, because I do think it is lacking. It's definitely lacking in everyday management. It's something that definitely I think workplaces and managers need to focus in on.
Yeah, if ever I have to give either some constructive criticism or just not even constructive, just something that's a bit more nuanced than a
Yeah,
text. Like my preferred platform is Zoom. If I can't meet in person, of course. Just
yeah,
in terms of like being able to see body language a little bit better, your tone, you can influence kind of the words that you're saying basically have less chance of being interpreted incorrectly than they might via text.
yeah. And that's the thing with written communication in the workplace and the emails and so on, where if you write something down and send it on an email, it can seem very harsh. If you say it over Zoom, your body language can kind of protect you very, very quickly, in that it naturally kind of covers over the way you're trying to communicate something. Maybe taken as being very harsh, in black and white. So sometimes you have to stop being lazy as well and kind of make that effort with the phone call or the Zoom call to try and see people face to face again.
Yeah, I think a really good example about that is if you just say how are you, right? If you type how are you into a message, I could be walking on the street and see you tomorrow, Damon. Like, well, hi, how are you? Do you know, as in like I'm still walking on, or I could
Yeah,
actually stop and go like, Damien, how are you? You know,
yeah,
if I put that in a text, you don't know which one am I doing just to like, how are you? I gotta go, or am I actually
yeah,
no,
yeah,
genuinely tell me how you're doing? So I think we can lose kind of that tonality when it comes to message-based communication.
yeah. No, it's. I think meeting face to face, whether that's online or in person, is very, very important. Um, and like I suppose a lot of research as well or experiences are telling us like we're avoiding that because it's harder.
Mm.
If I wrote out, if you sent me a few questions and I wrote it out, that would have been easier. And we could print it somewhere. I have to put more energy into this. You know what I mean? And when we're finished this podcast, I'm going to go off. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I'm just going to sit down and just not try not think or even talk to anyone for 5, 10 minutes together. But because I'm putting a bit of energy into this, so it takes energy. But obviously, this works much better than you asking me a few questions by email and then printing my answers like that. You don't get the same results out of that. And also, what I'm saying can be misconstrued, obviously, or taken up in a different way. Whereas if you're watching what I'm trying to say here, or what I'm trying to get across, or the opinions or the insights that I'm giving you, much easier for people to get that because they can see my facial expressions and take it for actually what it is or what I'm trying to put across. So sometimes it takes that little bit more energy to kind of achieve the better result, and we have to remember that as well.
Yeah, like you said, it's the better result, even though it requires more of you at the time, it can be scary, daunting, hard, whatever you want to put on it. But yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap it up. Damien, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and thank you for all the great work that you're all doing in HR, buddy.
Thanks very much, Podge. Great to be on with you. Thanks.
All right, cheers. Take care, folks.